super nice to see you all. So glad you could make it today. And I'm really excited that I'm going to be speaking to Ekta today. And of course, we go back a long way. And I've seen Ekta's work evolve over the years, uh, right from her work as an apparel designer in NID, and then the work that she continued to do, where she sort of works in between art and wearable art and narrative with Stitch. So I'm super excited to be speaking to you, Ekta, babe. Um, what I really like about what you do, Ekta, which is sort of distinct from a lot of us, is we go around stumbling about with absolutely no focus, and we're always sort of figuring out things by error. Ki ye to nahi karna hai. This is messed up. But you, I think, have always grown a lot, but stayed within a particular niche, and you've always had that razor sharp focus, and you've always seemed like you knew what you were doing, which is I think an admirable quality. And so Ekta's the woman who knows what she wants and gets it, makes it happen, and she does it with the most utmost grace and an elegance and sophistication, which she will share with you today. Her work is simple and beautiful, and what I love is the way she's able to literally weave narrative through Stitch. So Ekta, daughter of two scientists, entomologists at that, how the hell did you not become a scientist yourself or an academic, for someone who loves living in a library?
Such a great question to start with, isn't it?
Let's spotlight you. Anuj, spotlight Ekta. If you're still there.
Are you, Anuj? You're missing.
Yeah.
Wake up.
So why don't you start with that lovely slide that you showed me yesterday of mom and dad?
Yeah, let's start with that. I'm going to go into my screen share. And let me know if you guys are seeing this on your screen, and then
yes, yes, we are.
Great. So after that introduction, by the way, I can totally feel a halo growing around my head.
And you should, babe.
Yeah, so I totally feel that I am a proper celebrity. So here's my first slide, which, if it works. So these are my parents, both of them scientists, as I said. They're entomologists, rather they were entomologists steeped into academia. And I just saw that life so up close, and growing up I thought that's how everyone's life was, and therefore I could also see, you know, the pitfalls, and I could see the frustrations, and somehow I always thought I'll forge my own path, you know. I mean, this seemed like the known, and I was always drawn to the unknown, kind of writing my own story by my own rules. That's why I think I didn't end up going into academia, although in a strange way I still continue teaching, and we'll come to that a little later. So here are my folks. They met at college, fell in love, got together, and got married. I'm trying to change slides now. That's baby me.
There you are.
And my mom, I believe, was still doing her PhD when she had me. So, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how she balanced her commitments for doing her PhD and have a baby, especially in the first crazy months of having a child.
And I see that you're carrying on in similar spirit.
I was an official zombie after having the baby. That's me and my baby brother. And this is pretty much what I grew up seeing around me. I mean, drawers and drawers full of this. And also at home, there were kind of bottles and jars that had insect specimens, which were beach mein dal and, chawal and jars of this.
So Ekta, no fear at all of creepy crawlies, I'm
I had
assuming
no
here.
fear of at all of this, but of the insects. But at the same time, it wasn't that I was spellbound and in love with. I did love helping my parents around. Whenever they went for insect collection trips, I did love joining them, and my brother joined them too. And we used to hold like a net and wave it around and catch whatever we did. And also, I remember my handwriting. I could write very, very small. So my mom used to enlist my help for labeling the little insects. She was a taxonomist, so she would often label her specimens. So my task sometimes, when I was really, really good, was to label the small pieces of paper and put like a pin in. So that was childhood.
That's just a stunning picture. The colors are crazy.
Amazing.
I can see where all in a weird way, how the creepy crawlies have continue to inspire you.
Yeah. We were talking about libraries earlier. I mean, they're my absolute favorite places. And I remember when I was a kid, my parents would often in the evenings go to the library to study and to research. And they would sometimes take us along. And I remember this experience of going through catalog cards. And I loved that. It's such a shame they're gone now. It was such a sensual experience of feeling through your hands.
In fact, for all of us here from our generation of NIDians, I'm sure all of you remember the musty smell, guys, before our library became KMC. Yes. Oh my God, just crazy to sort of go through that. Yeah, it's such a beautiful picture. I miss that.
This picture is not really from the family archives. Unfortunately, I don't have any. We are from the analog generation, isn't it? We didn't have any digital photographs of growing up years. But I put it in because it's a lovely kind of link right back to my childhood conversations, some of the earliest conversations too, with my mom and my grandmama, my nani. Her family was deeply involved with the jute trade, and my nani grew up in Kolkata. So I think that was perhaps the earliest link to textiles that I can kind of look back to. But equally, there were conversations around, saris that my mom would show me of my grandmother. I did not know my grandmother. She had passed away long ago. I think when my mother was about 10. But she would show me these saris, and it would be such an instantaneous connection to a grandmom I'd never met. So I was, all of that was kind of in the background, I was intrigued by that, but probably didn't have the vocabulary to even understand that textiles carry this emotional connection within its fibers. So I knew I was interested in textiles, but I didn't really know what to do with it. This is my school. Many years later, I went there. I don't have any photographs of me.
This is Hisar, isn't it, Ekta? You grew up in Hisar.
I was born in Haryana, and that's the university. So I remember growing up with like wide avenues lined with gulmohar and amaltas trees, and going for swimming in the evening, and kind of growing up with peers whose parents were also professors. So life was fairly simple. It only consisted of school and play in the evening, and all your peers had exactly the same context as you. So I'll just go back a couple of slides maybe here. I mean, in school, I was a good student, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go after school. In an environment which was fairly academic, all my peers were kind of preparing for med school or IITs.
Was there ever pressure on you? Because
Never.
Never. That's amazing.
I mean, my parents must, now looking back, they must be very unusual parents, never to have pressurized either myself or my brother into any kind of academic achievement, or even, nudges into, now you must do this and do that. So we kind of felt our way, at least I did, felt our way through, our careers. And I took up science, not really knowing what else was an option. In my school, taking up humanities was not really an option. So I kind of went with the crowd and did whatever everyone else was doing. But I was fairly sure I didn't want to, go down the route of, becoming a doctor or anything like that. I was very attracted to the idea of doing something creative, preferably with textiles. For a while, I even fancied becoming a writer, but I just didn't know how to become a writer. So I ended up here. This is the college where I did my undergrad, and it was in clothing and textiles. And it was here really I got to, I was introduced to different types of embroidery in India. And I remember seeing examples of fulkari growing up, things that my mother had inherited. But I didn't really understand the context or the types of stitches. It was here really that I started to learn a bit about them. But this was a very conventional way of teaching.
Right. And this is also where you first heard about this mythical place called NID. एक ऐसी जगह है, ईंट वाला बिल्डिंग, मोर होते हैं वहाँ पे.
More तो नहीं सुना था, but I did hear that there was this mythical place, and this is pre-internet, so it was only what you heard from your friends, and what was kind of handed down to you by the way, if you're interested in creativity, this could be something to consider. But by then I was already 1 year in when I first found out about NID. I remember again, sitting in a library and I think leafing through some magazine or periodical. I don't even remember what it was, but it was a very small article on NID, and I saw, I think it was a picture of the main gate or maybe the logo. I don't remember which, but it just blew my mind. I was like, never have I seen NID written like that. I mean, these people must be so cool.
Yeah, that's probably most of our, at least the plebs that all of us were, that was the first experience with any kind of logo that you sort of took notice of and understood.
So and also, exactly, it was kind of something that caught me in my tracks, but not that I considered doing graphic design or had even a notion of what graphic design could be. So anyway, I figured out that there was this place. I spoke with, eventually got to hear about what you might need to do. So I was told that I had missed the boat going after school, but there was another route which was called AP, where if I finished my graduation and gave this test and was selected in the interview, I would be able to still go.
Did you have any memories of the interview? Were you nervous? हाथ वाथ काँप रहे थे तेरे? Yeah, did you एक बड़ा सा portfolio लेके गई?
नहीं, कोई भी portfolio नहीं था. I had probably one sketchbook and one of my embroideries. But let me show you here. Yeah. I did find an image of me, and you can see honor board पर there is my name. So I was like fully committed.
तो हमारे पास अभी proof है that you अच्छी student थी.
IT, first IT. So I was told to finish my degree about 2 months before the rest of the class. I mean, this was of course when I found out that I had been selected for an ID. But this during this time I was kind of really into academics and enjoying being with the first in class full Hermione Granger mode. And the book on the right is a book that was, I think, a very early influence. My mom gave it to me, and not this exact copy. This is something from the internet I found, but it was equally dog-eared and quite beaten out. And but the character of Jo March really stayed with me. I mean, this was a woman who was fiercely independent, who was writing, who wasn't just dreaming of getting married and settling down. So that made a big impression on me. Let's go on to the next one.
Oh,
Right, back
yes.
to
Let's go
Ahmedabad.
on to haloed grounds now.
Hallowed ground. So you asked me about if I have any memories of my interview process.
If not that, what was it like to sort of,
No, I do have a couple of memories. One was the workshop, which I enjoyed tremendously. I think it was we were asked to make a box, but without
Oh,
you.
even APs had to do the same things, huh? Make stuff for
Even
this.
us, imagine.
True.
And in the interview, I think I remember Aditi smiling beatifically and, asking some questions, and they gave me a stapler. I think it was a stapler, asking what will happen, if it's it's a massive size multiplied in I don't know how many number of times the size. And I remember saying that it will make a great slide, and then coming out and regretting. It's like, oh, I should have said something.
So all I was thinking of is the harm that one could do with it, or to make them, matlab, it was like T-Rex type.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see some of those lovely pictures of NID now, which you showed me.
So this picture I chose from the early archives of NID, when I think the campus was still being born. But I love this picture in the way it sort of talks about this dialogue between the ancient and the modern. And this building, which was obviously mid-century architecture and standing next to this old monument, I think it has shaped my aesthetic, my approach to work in more ways than one. And the Mahagurus.
So nice to see this picture.
The two of them together. I mean, what lovely people and what lasting legacy. What Ranjan and Aditi gave me was a new way of looking at things, of life really, and how they were with students, how they nurtured us. And without ever telling the solution directly, you were always I remember Aditi's seminal course, fabric construction. For me, it took a long time to finish and to arrive at where she would have liked us to arrive at. And I would always remember, she would say, I'll go and find out. And that is so empowering, right? Instead of just telling someone what to do, go and find out was amazing. And I've kind of tried to hold on to that. And as many other textiles graduates and apparel graduates would relate, there's an Aditi voice in your head. Right.
I remember you speaking about this. Yeah.
You're kind of, she's the one holding the bar high for you. So, and if you're a teacher like that, what an astonishing and amazing teacher you are. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was apparel design.
Why does Anuj have to photobomb every single picture in this world?
Well, Anuj, this one is legit. He was part of apparel.
Oh, yeah, right, true. But this is your batch.
No, this is not my batch. Actually, it's the first year, which is the 7 of us on the right-hand side with Meenakshi.
Yes, Meenakshi, yeah.
Left, the 4, Amit, Anuj.
Your seniors. Huh?
Yes, they were, but it was such a lovely, almost like a little family being embraced by them. And our studio was also kind of on the first floor, right next to ceramics, and we were slightly kind of at a distance from the others, which was also nice. I mean, it was a great source of envy to me that why you all got to sit next to each other, and we were relegated to the ground floor. But I remember in the hot summer days, a lot of you guys would come down because it used to be one of the cooler studios, and we had a big
Yeah.
light table, so we were fancy.
Very fancy. I spent a lot of time in that studio.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Um, well, that is the only photo that I have been, my lovely batchmates have sent it to me. I didn't have a single one, but this is during that famous fabric construction course where all of us
Oh,
were
look
working.
at the chaos on the table now.
But like, as you can see, still very, very happy and enjoying ourselves. That's
Oh, these extremely leggy women.
so once upon a time. This was a trip we took to Diu, I think. And, it was just lovely hanging out with mates, and Madhu's process of developing a narrative and Shilpi's way of approaching typography made a big, big impression on me. And also, I think, all this horsing around silliness.
These
That was
pictures are bringing a big smile to my face. It's just,
mine too.
yeah, happy times.
Yeah, Anuj again can be seen photobombing this. um, these are some
And let's
photos.
talk about your final
My
project with Asha Sarabhai. Yeah.
No, this wasn't with Asha Sarabhai.
Oh,
This
okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
was in Delhi. And it was a lovely time for me to kind of really put to use what I had learned in for the last 3-4 years. There's lovely Anu Mishra, and by this point I had, let's just move forward one or two, graduation and the first job. So by this time I knew. Sorry, I'm going to pull the curtain. The sun is in my face. That I was deeply interested in textiles, and the way that I was approaching even clothing began with first designing the surface. I was doing shibori and embroidery, several other processes, but it sort of grew from there. The textile was very much the soul of the garment, and then I was kind of taking it into forms. I also discovered this about myself, that I was more excited about the textiles than I was with playing with form, for example. And this was the point I kind of graduated. My first job straight out of school was with a wonderful, wonderful design studio in Ahmedabad called the Rag Studios with Asha Sarabhai. Many of you might know that her work is really revered around the world. It stands for minimalism. It is known for its use of traditional Indian techniques, but kind of presenting them at an international platform. So I have a few images of. So the first few months were spent in Calico Museum. I mean, Calico anyway was a bit of a temple for all of us in textile and apparel. Every other week we would be going there. But when I started work, the studio was in what was known as retreat. So surrounded by these beautiful greens and beautiful, beautiful books and the traditions that they had kind of built up with. About, I think when I joined them, they were already a very well established international brand, 20 or 25 years old already.
I remember you did mention that the sort of pared back style that you have, that sort of, you sort of came home with that, with this final project. That sort of sensibility is something that's got honed here with this project, right?
And indeed it did. And also the way of working, I mean, it felt like an extension of NID. These were the sorts of spaces when they finally moved to the Kotarpur farm. This very much felt in the same language, the same way of working. I mean, these are were the studios. So on the left, where you see the Nandi Bell, is the design studio. At the top of the image um, is the print studio. So, you know, the vernacular was so appealing, and it was full of greenery, calm spaces, and the pace of work was also very slow and nurturing. I mean, these were the only two examples I could find of what I was doing then, but the Rag Studio has a collaboration with the Miyake Design Studio. So even, you know, interacting with Japanese designers who were coming in and looking at the work that they were bringing in was a wonderful education for me. And I think it helped me hone the aesthetic that I had started developing at NID.
Right.
So these are, like I said, the other two examples. But I remember during this time going for walks in the farm and picking up, you know, little seeds, or sometimes drawing out barks and then coming back to the studio and interpreting them as embroideries or textures. So a wonderful, wonderful period that was, but it was brought to a sudden halt. I think when riots broke out, and I was by then living in Paldi, which and I think I rented a flat which was very close to NID. So in a strange sort of way, I was connected with NID, but not really. And that security blanket that you have living inside the campus wasn't really there. So when riots broke out, my parents got really concerned and urged me to come back to Delhi, which I did eventually. So my next phase, by this point, my parents had also moved to Delhi. And here I worked as a freelancer and did some really interesting projects, some with Fab India, and this particular one was with Ritu Kumar, where there was a big pile of discarded leather, and I was kind of asked to do something with them. So I developed this patchwork kind of surface, and we did a collection of bags, and this was one of them. But I did multiple series of them, which was great fun. And then Aditya happened. So yesterday we were chatting, and you know, you were asking me about biggest takeaways from NID, and I think it's definitely the friendships. It's definitely the tacit learning that happened outside of the studios and just observing what was going on and what the peers were doing at the time. But also meeting Aditya would not have happened had it not been for NID. So this is my lovely family. My father-in-law, my mom-in-law, our two kids, Aditya and Mayank. On the extreme right is Mayank, who himself is a textile alumnus of NID, and my brother-in-law. So he was the one who introduced us and brought us together. So yeah, I have much to thank NID for. And these friendships, you know, that have endured since then. And I have to say, we look nicer in our 40s, don't we?
Yes, I certainly do.
So the next,
yes,
where the journey.
तो फिर और पढ़ाई करने का कीड़ा
मतलब फिर आया
इतना.
So as I told you, I was really very passionately interested in textiles, and I wanted to explore it further. And also I felt that working on clothing, it just felt a bit restrictive. I wanted to kind of move into interiors, perhaps architecture. I mean, textiles could be so much more. And this idea of, you know, how we understand apparel design, for example, at NID, is very much about, creating things that would last you for years, that are classics, that are not driven by trends, is the antithesis of what it was outside when I started working.
True.
So personally, I couldn't wrap my head around, why must we have a new wardrobe every few months, and what are these trends? So I thought I wanted to work with something that is more enduring. And I just harking back to that idea we talked about initially, that my grandmother's saris, were passed on to my mother and then myself. So I wanted to do something like that would one day be passed on. So yeah, just decided to go back to school then. And at the time, I had applied and was accepted at RISD in the States. And also the UK was completely plan B. I thought if that RISD doesn't work out, I could potentially look at the UK. But as life is, completely unexpected, I found myself in Edinburgh simply because I had a scholarship which paid for everything, my fee,
Right.
my tuition fees, and I was back in my Hermione Granger mode, right?
Let's jump to some of the work that your final project. Yes.
Yeah. So this was what I did over my master's. These long lengths of textiles was really play for me. I kind of looked at everything, needle punching and printing and digital printing, traditional embroidery, all of that. And I showcased my work in London, and a curator happened to spot it, and she offered me a solo exhibition at the time. So this was my first outing with my work. And let's go back there. So by then, having graduated, I wanted to set up my own practice, like desperately wanted to set up my own practice. I had no intentions of going and working for somebody. And in fact, that was another reason why I didn't choose to go to the States, because it would have meant that I would have had to pay a big loan back, and therefore several years working out in the industry. So this felt a more pragmatic route to take. Everything was paid for, and I could just get started doing what I had always dreamt of doing. But as all students will know, especially those who study abroad, there's not a lot of money to spare. And when I finished, obviously we were in another country. We had no parents to go and cry to, and no studio space, and no equipment.
And in spite of all that, you decided to become an entrepreneur in a completely different country, not have any fail safes, none of that. You just decided, I'm going to be exceptionally brave and do this. How the hell did you do that?
Feel like that. It just felt like a compelling desire, like there was no other route to take but this one. Right. Do you remember that when we were little, and our teeth begin to fall, and there is that loose hanging tooth that you have to touch with your tongue.
This is not an analogy I would have thought of, but Ekta.
You have to touch it, and you have to kind of, it's bad for you, but you still do it. So in my case,
let's also change slides. So we look at
change slides. Right.
Jump kar. Let's see some of that beautiful work.
Right. So this I want to show you. This is how I figured out a way of setting up my business. This is the Crafts Council, which at the time had an award which was called Next Move. And it was really for people who were wanting to take the next move from college into a career. And that's my cohort of 8 people. We were chosen across England and Wales. And basically what it meant was that we will be given a studio space within a university in exchange for some teaching and access to studio equipment, which was fantastic for me. So I packed my bags from Edinburgh and landed up in Bath.
Completely idyllic and romantic.
Yeah.
Bath, Jane Austen
And
land.
I didn't mention my love for Jane Austen. And when I found myself in Jane Austen land, it was like, wow, ये तो असली में है. So this is the time when Ekta Kaul, the business, was born, and I focused during this time.
No worries. Yeah, we're good.
This was looking at handwriting and going back to very much to my NID roots, so kind of playing with textures and playing with very simple elements and repeating them. So I had great fun doing these. These were quilts intended for the wall and also for domestic interiors. So this was a commission I did for a collector who commissioned me to make all of this work. And at this time, I was kind of still trying to decide which route to take. Do I want my work to be wall-based work, or do I want it more domestic? And also all that training in apparel came in handy, where I started with a small range of scarves. And these were designed to be worn in multiple ways. I mean, they had these silk buttons, baubles on the side. And this is, as everyone would know in India, these are potli buttons. And I thought it made such a lovely connection with, saris and the way we drape them in hundreds of different ways. So my idea was that, instead of being a regular scarf, it could become something more playful as an accessory. And I want to talk a little bit about my logo, and I want to thank Shalini Singh for designing this beautiful logo, which people tell me look like a pair of scissors, which is just perfect.
Such a clever logo, man. It's just beautiful.
I love this, and thank you, Shalini, to eternity and beyond for doing this. And again, those NID friendships, like I was saying, they endure through life, and just NID is a gift that just keeps giving, really. This was my first show. This is in Somerset House in central London, and this is called Origin, which the Crafts Council used to host at that time. So that's me, fully ready to face the world. and really excited that here I am. This was, I think, 2008 or 2009. We were in depths of global meltdown, right? I mean, the economy was just like we had never seen before. And I was totally undeterred by that. I was convinced that when people would see my work, of course they would buy it. So London happened. We moved to London because it seemed like the right place to be. All my shows were anyways happening in London. So Bath to London is about an hour and a half. So we decided that we didn't need to be doing this commute, and we can just be living in London. And this was my first studio in London. This is Livingston Studio in Hampstead, which is a gallery. But at the rear end, they have some studio spaces, which I was really, really lucky to be offered. And this was an oasis of creativity. I mean, you had these beautiful clothes surrounding you, and also ceramics from Japan, some textiles, antique textiles, and also clothing from Italy. I mean, it's very, very international. So I loved my stint here. This was the terrace where we would come out and have coffee and chat and rant. So by this point, I was beginning to make more wall-based work, and this was my exhibition at So I started getting my work into quite prestigious galleries by this time. And it felt like this was few and far, a shop on Brompton Road where I first had my work. Sadly, this no longer exists, but all wasn't hunky dory. So this is me, several months pregnant, as you can tell from.
This is with Kabir.
हाँ
This is
हाँ
the first baby. Yeah.
सब कुछ खुद कर रही थी, right? So that's my intern, by the way, who also doubled up as my model because I could not afford to pay anybody. And I was shooting myself, everything, and taking my work to various fairs and shows in and around London, and also all over the place, all over in the UK. So then came lovely Kabir. He was born, and it was also a very tumultuous period for me personally. My mother had been diagnosed with cancer, and she actually, the same year that my son was born, she passed away. So my life was turned upside down. All of those things that you hear about, new moms were of course happening with me, but I was also dealing with a huge loss. So and when while she was ill and undergoing chemotherapy, and I was in London, I was kind of making multiple trips to India. And I was questioning really, what home is, and why am I still coming back to London, or what does home or Delhi mean to me? And just in response to kind of that question, I made two pieces, and you see them here on the wall. These are the only two pictures I have of that exhibition. So once I made these, um, it felt really, what shall I describe it? Perhaps cathartic. I mean, in Delhi, it was so easy to know what it meant to me, right? My parents' house, where my mom's lab was, where my dad had taught me how to drive, all those roads brought hundreds of memories back. So what was it about London that I was still calling home, or even questioning whether this was home? But drawing the map itself, I could tell that I was beginning to make memories in this city as well, where my studio was, for instance, or the walks that I took with Adi, or, where I was teaching. I was beginning to, make this city my own. And once these maps were finished, it felt like somehow in that narrative, I had claimed both the places as my own.
Yeah.
So
that's very beautifully put. And I sort of get it. When you put something to paper, whether it's ink or stitched to cloth, there's a certain permanence that you're giving to unexpressed feelings. And that I understand how it's such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way to start, beautiful reason to start something like this. So the fact the map narratives and the sort of cathartic release that, yeah.
This, if we, there was a little display that the gallery allowed me to have of, pieces that I was drawing inspiration from, or kind of had been at the backdrop of all this. And the red Pochampalli is my mom's sari, and the cream one is my nani's sari. So they both sat next to each other, and they formed very much the backdrop of this whole body of work. And I thought, for me, that was very important to have their presence there. And both the maps sold then. I would have loved to have had better pictures of them, but I just didn't get the chance to do a proper photo shoot. But ever since then, this was in 2011, I think. Ever since then, I have been exploring maps, and I seem to have found a great kind of a vehicle for storytelling. I feel that, it's a subject that I'm excited about intellectually, but also visually. They're such beautiful objects. So I make these to commission, and for 2 or 3 different types of clients. Often they are for domestic clients who would ask me to kind of make a map of their life story, for example, and places that are important to them, significant to their personal narratives. I would embroider onto the maps. I also work with interior designers and architects who would commission me to make something for a particular space. So this is me in the studio. That smile is just for the camera, by the way. Usually I'm a lot more stressed out than this. This is a recent commission that I did for Liberties, the store on Regent Street, and they wanted me to make something for their permanent collection, but kind of the centerpiece is obviously the architecture. And I got to learn so much about the history of the building. I mean, it's kind of, the architecture is inspired by ships that the original owners had. HMS Hindustan was one of them, and they used to send out these ships to trade with the Orient and bring back beautiful silks and carpets and ceramics. So it was such a fascinating journey for me. And I also have to thank Valerie, who's here, who kind of made all of this possible, because she was working with Liberty at the time and doing an exhibition. And she and I went along for these meetings, and somewhere along the line, this commission kind of transpired from them. So going back again to an idea gift that keeps giving, these are all thanks to NID and what we learned there and the people that we were with. This is another piece that I did for a client. This is the British Isles, but they wanted me to embroider places where their family ancestry is. So
even the alphabets and everything is embroidered.
Yeah, everything is embroidered. The text is hand embroidered, and the outline, the map outlines are machine embroidered. So this is quite a contemplative moment for me, and I wanted to share this with you guys. Whilst my practice was growing in leaps and bounds, and the accessories was kind of one side of the practice, and the maps were another. I was taking on a holiday with my family in St. Ives in Cornwall, and we had gone to see Barbara Hepworth, the sculptor's studio and home. If I move on to the next slide, you can see her garden. So this is where she lived, by the sea, and she had these beautiful, beautiful pieces in her garden. And I was pregnant with my second baby then. And to me personally, her work and the way she approached her work and how she carried on is hugely inspiring, not the least because she had triplets. And I remember sitting in that garden and thinking, well, if she can make this work with 3 kids, triplets that too, surely I can make this work as well with 2 kids. And this was kind of one of the last shows before the baby came. On the right is New York, Manhattan, the Museum of Art and Design. I went to do a show in New York with my accessories, and on the left is there's another interiors show I did with my maps. So just before the baby came, I was like hugely busy doing all of this, but it was also a moment where I had to kind of reflect whether I would be able to carry on in the same way. The answer was obviously not. I would have to make changes. And that's little Kavya and Kabir. I think she's a few days old. Then she's looking so astonished at the book. And that's with Kabir. Anyway, so I wanted to kind of share with you that artists and looking at their work has always been a source of inspiration for me. And whenever I felt my spirits flagging, I would just make a trip to Tate Modern.
I'm going to butt in here. Ekta, when I was in London, I think I spent a miserable year in London because I went completely unprepared and I didn't make any friends and I was in the dumps. But Valerie, you and Rachna really, really helped me get my shit together. And our visits to Tate, Liberties, and us hanging out, Valerie's studio, really put the life back. And I remember those. The first time that I ever had scones, guys, with butter and tiny tea cakes was with Ekta in one of these places.
Yeah. I know we were all gutted when you left. We thought we'd kind of treat you and show you all the places and feed you cake so you'll never leave. Leave you did and ditched us. So these are photos from many exhibitions that I visited when Kabir was little, and Agnes Martin is another huge inspiration for me. But the biggest one of them all is Annie Albers, and how she was an educator and a designer and an artist all rolled into one has made a big impression on me. And I love the way she kind of structured her practice so she could do all of this. This is kind of a new development for my work. I started watercolor paintings, and these paintings and my maps took me to Japan. And I see that Neelu was on this call earlier. Neelu, are you here?
Neelu was, I think Neelu's.
Yes.
Yep, I'm still here.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
So
I'm not starting the video because I'm in pajamas.
We can handle you in pajamas, Neelu. So these took me to Tokyo, and that was at the time when I met with Neelu, and she totally took me under her wing. She drove me around all of Tokyo, hosted me at her house, and they are, for me personally, they feel like an exciting development, and I'm keen to kind of pursue and see where they take me next. I mean, lots of good things have happened with them. Now the Crafts Council is acquiring one of the works with them, with these, and I've started getting commissions. These are my map kits. So they're embroidery kits, and my idea was to kind of democratize the embroidery process. And people can buy these. They can attend like a tutorial with me, and I teach them how to embroider. But really, it's kind of all the cities that I love. I've put my love of travel and love of place in them. That's me in Paris. And at Shakespeare and Company, the beautiful bookshop there, and I've slyly put it here in my Paris map as well. So, I mean, these maps are, to me, they're intensely personal, and they're slightly whimsical as well. And they're intended for people to enjoy, and they invite people to personalize these as well as their own spaces, as their own locations that they love. So that's Paris. And my next section talks about teaching, which is an important part of my practice. And I now teach at various institutions. I collaborate with Selvidge at the V&A, Kettle's Yard, the Crafts Council. But I thought I'll show you some images from my master classes at the VNA. And here I'm teaching Kantha, and you can see the high-tech setup. When I said to them, they wanted to have a bigger group, and I was like, how will I do something which is so small and intimate to
That's
somebody?
amazing.
A group of like 15 people. But they were like, don't worry, we're all kitted out. You just have to sit there. And there was a camera, and which was being projected.
Fabulous. So there's an overhead camera that's doing a close-up of the work you're doing.
Embroidery of what I was doing, and then once I had finished doing that, then I kind of went around to and spoke to them individually.
What a stunning place to have a workshop. My God.
So wonderful. And also obviously all the archives. This is another museum that I really love. It's called the Leighton House Museum in Notting Hill. And I've been teaching some workshops there, some to adults, but this one is with year 8 children. And I loved introducing Stitch to kids, and I'm happy to say that they took to it. You can see boys doing it, and I feel like this is such a gender specific thing. I don't know why, knowing that most couture houses have men at the helm, and in India so many men embroider professionally, that is. There seems to be some hesitation from men to pick up the needle. So I put that image in just to say that, it can
well
be
done, Ekta.
fulfilling to boys as well. And obviously I teach at the studio as well. So this photo is my studio. That's what it looks like. So I work from a studio space, which is called Cockpit Arts in central London. And it's a collective of artists and makers. There are about 75 of us in the building, and most studios are shared between artists. And it makes a fantastic community. You feel like you're in the same boat as other people. There is a lot of learning that happens. You have people to bounce off ideas with. So for me, it really works to be there. Otherwise, it can be fairly isolating to be working as an artist by yourself. Kind of, we live in our own heads anyway for a lot of the time. So it's nice to be going somewhere and then meeting people who are obviously doing something in the same field, but also who are equally passionate and slightly mad like you. So and now of course I'm not going in because it's locked down, and I want to really avoid going into central London. But
I'm going to do a quick check with Sajid and Anuj about how we're doing on time. Sure. Do you think we could do another 10-15 minutes, guys?
I think we're good.
Yeah. We are good? All right, awesome. Yeah. So I have a story, Ekta, about the workshops. When I was in London, I assisted you on one of these workshops that you were doing in your studio. Yes. And of all the people in this wide world, you gave me, the coffee drinker, the Tamilian, the task to make tea for all these very, very snooty and intimidating looking British women. And I swear I had never made tea in my life till then. I thought dip wala tea tha. Beep beep beep. I remember like a little bride coming in with cups. This is probably one of the bravest things I've done, and that's because of you. And I'm sure they hated the bloody tea, and I'm sure I'm screwed it up. But
no, they didn't.
Don't forget how frightened I was of making tea at your workshop. But what I remember the most is how you are when you teach. She's completely. Sonam says, Ekta, don't worry, he can make tea. Thank you, Sonam. That's a handy skill. I've picked up now, Sonam, too late. Now I can make nice adrak wala wo, lalu type chai also I can make now. So what I remember the most, Ekta, about watching you teach is the utter calm that you have. And it's everything. And I like the way things slow down. And what you're able to create for the people who stitch with you is this meditative space. And that's something that I've really loved. And I think that's a really meaningful space that you create. Yeah.
It's
Valerie
less
saying,
me,
Ekta, are you listening?
more the embroidery. I think, embroidery is such a meditative process in its own right that I think I just kind of help it along by taking myself out of the way. But people can, the minute you put a needle and thread together and you embroider, suddenly you automatically you slow down. I myself
Absolutely.
experience this every time. I mean, I can suddenly hear my own breathing. It's like that quiet. I become aware of the sound that the thread makes as it comes out of the fabric. I mean, normally we're not tuned into that at all, and that process can feel so meditative. So let me take you through some more images. So in the studio, we do map making, but also other embroidery masterclasses like Kavita, for example. I want to show you some photos of my public participatory project. Now, this particular one is called Chiswick Without Borders. So for the last 10 years, thanks to Rachna being in Chiswick, who introduced me to West London when we moved to West London first, then this is a neighborhood that I have known for the last decade of my life. And I was offered this opportunity to do a public participatory project. So I wanted to celebrate the idea that people can be from anywhere, and this was in the context of Brexit, which had just happened, and I was trying to respond to that as an individual, as someone who had come from another country and had always felt embraced by everyone I met, especially by London. I mean, the very character of London, that everyone is from somewhere else, makes it such a global city. On any given day, you hear multiple languages, whether you are in the tube or, my son's school, for example, about 60 languages are spoken in a small primary school. So the special thing about London is the fact that it's so diverse, it's so international, and I wanted to celebrate that. So I did a map. I printed a map of Chiswick alongside a map of the world, and I asked people to pin. Maybe you can see it better in the next slide. To pin small icons of swallows. They were kind of symbolic migratory birds on where they have their family roots in the world to where they live in Chiswick. And then with a team of volunteers, we embroidered all of these bird trajectories. So here you see me. First, we were unpinning them and cutting the threads, and each of these was
This is the embroidered version. Oh, it's beautiful.
Embroidered version. And that's us looking very cheerful, but after like weeks of this, we were not so cheerful.
Oh, that's the scale of this. What's the scale of this, Ekta? How big is this?
I'll show you the next slide. It's about nearly 3 meters wide. So this is installed in our local library in Chiswick. And it's going to be on permanent display. And I feel so happy, and life has come a full circle from my love of embroideries to now, love of libraries to, my work living in a library.
Yes.
So it feels really fulfilling to have worked on this. The next one I'm going to share with you is called Portrait of Place. It's a project that I worked on last year. Was commissioned by Gunnersbury Park Museum, which is another local museum about 15 minutes from where I live. And I worked with 2 community groups. So one was a group of deaf and hard of hearing women, and the other was a multi-generational group. So from 18-year-olds to about 65-year-olds. And we made a map of the local area, and each of these black patches that you see embroidered with architectural icons, the group themselves chose of what is important to them in the area, and they embroidered it. So each one was embroidered by a different person. And that is what the final map looks like. And it's been acquired by the museum now and will remain on permanent display. The borders that you see on the map are also very meaningful. They are marked with the trees that grow in the garden of the museum. And we foraged for leaves, and then we dyed these fabrics together, and that fabric actually forms like the frame of the map. And what personally, I mean, more than seeing this done and hanging it on the museum wall, for me, what felt really meaningful were some of the remarks that, the feedback that I got from the group. So one of the women said to me that, before doing this project, I had never been to the museum. It was a space that felt quite intimidating, and it felt a bit alien, maybe a bit elitist also, because, museums are meant, like, often visited by people of a certain class. But she said after making this piece and seeing it hang there, she feels that there's a little bit of her hanging on the walls. She feels confident in bringing her friends and family and showing them that she helped in making this piece. And that for me was just so amazing to have made that possible for a person. That's the group. And finally, this is the last project we'll talk about. I was the artist in residence earlier this year in Chinatown, in Soho. It was a residency about listening to the local stories. Often Chinatown is experienced as a place of food and drink and quite transient, in like we're not really able to engage at a deeper level with Chinatown. So the outcome of about 3 months of research and talking to the local community members is this map. And each of the icons represents a story. So the blue circles that you see on the map are a nod to blue plaques on London streets. So normally these plaques commemorate local characters or local individuals who have made a big contribution. But in Chinatown, you don't see any of the Chinese diaspora being commemorated. And so to draw attention to that missing heritage, I made these. This map has now actually just been printed onto some products like tea towels and bags, and the shop has just gone live. Sorry, I didn't say that this is with an organization which is a charity based in Soho, and their whole agenda is to raise money for more cultural activities to be done in the area. And therefore they wanted to invite artists to come in as to come and stay for 3 months and develop some products that they can basically fundraise with. And I finish off with this. So with my practice, I feel that, it gives me connection, a sense of community, and a contemplative space. I did this map outside my studio. I asked people to place a little dot on wherever they'd traveled from. I wasn't really expecting many people to be. So in the middle is a map of London. On the left side of your screen is the UK, and on the right is the world map. I wasn't really expecting anyone to be coming from outside of London, and I was so pleasantly surprised that it was fairly international. And so it continues to be with my teaching as well. And during lockdown, obviously I'm not able to recreate this of a group of people sitting in an intimate space and exchanging stories while they embroider. So I've set up soothing stitch series online, and these are free to join for everybody. And through lockdown, the first lockdown that we had in the UK, I did them every week on Friday evenings. And I was invited by Radio 4 BBC to talk about these. So, I mean, work can take you in unexpected places as well. And it's all a big exploration and kind of playing with it. So with that, we stop.
Thank you, Ekta. Is the Joe March connection a big secret, or are we allowed to speak about it?
I'm not allowed to reveal the exact
Fine.
nature of it, but
All
I
right.
certainly say that I am I'm working on my first book now, and I'm contractually bound not to say what it's going to be about.
We will leave it there. Yes.
Yes, but I'm really excited, and my long-held dream of being a writer is finally coming true. So happy days.
Thank you, Ekta. That was brilliant.